instead of direct. All right, thank you, all of you for coming. This will be probably one of the first videos to be uploaded to a YouTube channel that I've decided to call Community Education for Liberation. I might occasionally delve into some news, but mostly I'm going to want to cover topics that can be immediately useful to people for building collective sovereignty, whether that's like in their neighborhood or their whole entire country that they live in. So today we've got Marco, Nick, and Roger. Thank you all for coming on here and agreeing to talk some basics about unions and workers cooperatives. I think that I'd like there to be more resources for people to just see quickly online about what is a workers cooperative, what is a union, maybe a little basics on how to form or join one. But also there's been a lot of, I've seen online, both on written and video social media numerous times over the past year or two, where people who are very heavily pro workers co-op might say that unions aren't worth the time, and vice versa. I've seen unionist people say that worker co-ops aren't really worth the time, and that's okay if maybe that those are our opinions in here. I kind of just want to have a discussion about why that is, and then also discuss maybe instead of that, where can unions and worker co-ops work together really well, and general strategy regarding that. So I want to start with Nick, because technically you're outnumbered as the really strong union guy. I think the other three of us have maybe more experience, at least with workers co-ops. Do you want to talk a little bit about unions, and maybe in particular your union, and what caused you to start doing union organizing in the first place, and what do you see as kind of like the really ideal end goal?
Yeah, I joined the labor movement back in 2015. I was part of this organization, um, a Leninist organization that had been building a concentration inside of UPS. And I'd worked alongside a lot of members of this organization in my city before, for a couple years. I was gradually won over to Leninism and to the line of this organization, and their approach was using the strategies that were first advanced by William Z. Foster. He was a union organizer in the early 20th century America. He eventually became the head of the Communist Party USA, really during his decline during the McCarthyist years. And but prior to that, he'd led a couple of really massive historic strikes, a massive railroad strike and steel strike, and many others. He worked in about every industry that existed in the U.S. at that time. He was originally a member of the IWW, and for anyone watching who's not familiar, Industrial Workers of the World, it was this organization, well, still exists. It was a really powerful organization in the early 20th century, though, and it had this approach of dual unionism. So you would join like whatever your trade union is. Like, for example, I'm a Teamster, but then I would also be a member of this other organization, the Industrial Workers of the World, which is trying to create one giant union for all workers in the United States. And it was, very radical. It was explicitly socialist, probably more of a anarcho-syndicalist bent. And the reason that Foster ended up rejecting that is because he saw that it took people out, it took militants out of the struggle within the big industrial unions, and took them, off in this little corner, creating this perfect union that conformed to all of their socialist ideals. And really left the playing ground open to the collaborationists and the business unions in the industrial trade unions, and that's why he rejected that. So he instead advocated a policy of boring from within the traditional trade unions, to go into an industry, into a shop, and build a base of support among the workers there, and be able to advocate and agitate within that circle of influence you build up on the shop floor through leading fights against the boss and bringing workers to a higher level of consciousness that way, and really just leading people in action and winning their trust and sort of dragging the union along behind you if they want to have the trust of the membership and be able to hang on to their support. They end up following your lead. And so I wasn't really concerned about rising in the ranks of the union, becoming an officer, taking over locals, unless that was advantageous within a particular context, but really maintaining a broad base of support on the shop floor level. And so that's what I started doing in 2015. I joined UPS, the organization I was with. They chose UPS because the logistical sector is extremely important in America. Now that there's, our manufacturing base is gone, there's far fewer choke points in the U.S. economy as there were in Foster's day. But logistics is still an incredibly important sector. I think it's something like 4 or 5% of U.S. GDP flows through UPS every year, and it's a company that exists everywhere in the United States. You don't need any level of education or training to join it, and so it presents an enormous opportunity to build up a militant base and be able to move towards actions like striking, which would really create like a heart attack in the U.S. economy if that were to occur. So I started doing that, found issues that workers were facing. The heat was a really big problem when I joined in 2015. People were getting sick, passing out on the job. I work in the UPS hub, and so we waged a campaign to get fans installed. We distributed petitions and buttons and shirts, and got people on board with this idea of installing fans all around the hub, which led to a partial victory at first, and later a full victory. So doing things like that, just identifying issues and working to solve them, and the union can get on board with that, or they can get left behind. And educating people through the struggle to win those victories. So we had this discussion on RBN stream with this panel recently, talking about unions versus co-ops. So I'll just reiterate what my argument then was. So the alternative model of building a workers co-op, I feel is a great thing to do. It's definitely better to work in a co-op versus at least a well-organized co-op versus a privately owned business. Workers should be able to share in all of the profits they create. They should have democratic control over the workplaces. It's definitely a much more pleasant experience, but I'm very skeptical of it as a vehicle to socialism, because in order to build a workers co-op that's able to overcome the power of capital, that means those businesses competing in the capitalist marketplace. And you're starting off from near zero against these massive corporate monoliths with countless billions in resources, and they can do things that you can't do. That they can pay people less and less and less. They can, in order to ensure higher profits and to be able to reinvest in their own business. They have things like buying power. When you look at Amazon or Walmart, they can really set the prices of what they are willing to sell things for, and manufacturers and distributors just have to meet that goal, or they'll go with someone else. Looking at UPS, it's this massive corporation that has it's a Fortune 500 company. It has large and small hubs all across the United States, from urban centers to far out rural areas. The World Port in Kentucky is this massive complex. It takes you 45 minutes from the time you walk in the gates to actually get to your workspace through, taking trams and shuttles. They've got 747s that UPS owns landing there every 90 seconds, landing and taking off to distribute goods around the country. Trying to imagine how you would be able to come up with a co-op version of that that could compete with UPS is really unimaginable to me. Just the billions and billions in capital and resources you would need to invest in that. And then if somehow you were able to secure that, well, UPS has the Teamsters within it that can push back against policies to cut our pay or benefits, or exploit us to a greater degree in order to make more profits for themselves. But other companies like Amazon and FedEx don't. So they would be at a massive advantage in that scenario. So
Nick,
what? Go ahead.
can I ask you a couple questions? First, so it seems like your biggest takeaway from William Z. Foster is that maybe the best use of time and resources for a real left organization that's interested in unionism is, rather than creating a more insular union where everyone already agrees with the farthest left version of whatever the plan is, to instead go and join really large unions in key sectors of the economy, so that you can educate the general working public that are in those unions already, and push their actions in a more militant direction. That's basically what you're saying, right?
Yeah. I mean, any organization, left organization, whether it's communist, anarchist, democratic, socialist, the people you're trying to win over to you are necessarily going to be closer to your ideology, and at least in the United States and probably most of the Western world, are a very, very small percentage of the population.
Yeah.
So in order to be effective, you need some kind of mass organizing, whether it's in the workplace or outside of it, that appeals to just regular people regarding the actual issues in their lives.
And then one other thing is, yeah, like the work that you and the rest of the people in your group, and maybe other groups of like mine, the work that you've done with UPS, I find very impressive. I think probably all of us on the panel do, and anybody who's really understood how much it took to get rid of, I believe you said it was Jimmy Hoffa Jr. and other kind of real mafia types who were running the Teamsters Union, basically to run it into the ground for decades, and run it in a direction that was actually supporting the boss's interest rather than the workers. So that's already very impressive. My question is, how do you view getting over kind of like the peak or the final hurdles with a union strategy? So you know what you've just done with the contract. By the way, was the contract voted to be approved?
Yes. Yeah, we
Yeah.
got a
So
good contract. It's a really good one.
yeah, so that contract just won billions of dollars, if I'm not mistaken, for work.
13 billion.
Yeah, so that I think really demonstrates the power of the strategy that you're talking about. But I guess my take is that for union struggle to be a really major piece in the road towards building up a socialist economy, one that works for all people and provisions, first of all, produces actually useful things, and then provisions a healthy life for the people in the economy. I still view like the unions can get very far up this mountain, and then I still feel like there's one part at the top where union struggle on its own can't necessarily accomplish that unless I'm not understanding correctly. um I feel like there would still need to be eventually some type of way to wield the state or really mass union power to say, not only have we negotiated billions of dollars away from stock buybacks and other stock market manipulations and paying for union busters. That's a lot of what bosses will, corporate executives will use that money for. But beyond redirecting the money and improving conditions in the workplace to actually take over the industries, what do you view as kind of the final plan, or the final steps that need to happen for unions to make that work? Is it only within the union struggle, or are there sort of outside forces and projects that need to be going on at the same time?
Yeah, well, I think right now it's purely speculative, and it's so far away. It's almost like metaphysical, um, because we haven't seen it anywhere in the capitalist world. Any kind of successful revolution or transition to socialism. Um, the reason I joined that Leninist organization was that just prior to that I was an anarchist, and I had these lofty ideals about how um, the world could be organized on this totally non-hierarchical basis, and we didn't have to use force or coercion against anybody. And I gave that up when I started just looking at the realities of the world we live in, and the uh, history of revolution. That there was one basic model that had worked, that had at one point uh, covered a third of the world's population and half the world's landmass. And I thought that was just the best bet we had to making a socialist society here, is what had worked elsewhere in the world. Uh, um, but it doesn't really seem to be a model to me anymore, to be something that's very applicable in 21st century America, or anywhere in the developed world. The idea of building up this vanguard party that storms the Winter Palace and takes over the mechanisms of state. I don't see that happening in the United States. And at this point, we need to just, I think we should focus on stopping the bleeding. I mean, I've spent so much time debating, uh, the best path towards revolution, and how the another world could be organized. But at this point, we're still at the lowest point of union membership ever, even with all of the public goodwill we have towards unions, even with these big visible things like the Starbucks unionization, the Amazon warehouse in New York, the wave of teacher strikes a few years ago, all these things that have really captured people's imaginations. I think we're probably maybe the highest ever approval of unions. In 2022, we hit an all-time low um, when the numbers came out early this year, and in a few months we'll get the numbers on 2023. And I don't think there's any reason to believe that things have gotten any better.
As far as membership,
Um, as far as membership, I think we're at 6% in the private sector, and I think just over 10% in the public sector. Although now the public sector, because of the, what was it, Janus ruling? They were wrong about the name, but the Supreme Court ruling basically made right to work national for all public sector workers, meaning they don't have to pay their dues, and the union's still obligated to represent them the same way they do paying members.
Yeah.
There's every reason to believe that that's going to go down as well. So, I mean, looking off far in the future, and things can change really quickly just because it took us uh, 90 years to get to this low point from our height doesn't mean it's going to take 90 years to get back. History can have very abrupt changes. But it's still, I mean, it might as well be 9,000 years from where we're sitting and what we're able to see and conceive right now, as far as what that final push will be.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I feel like it's always good to to be willing to say this project could well take longer than the time I have to work with in my life. But I'm open to we have to be open to the possibilities that conditions change very rapidly and we need to be able to react and take advantage. I mean, I think in the international realm, politics are changing so quickly. There's always a chance that type of flux can happen nationally. But I want to move to Roger. I think Marco is almost like the middle point, 100% union, 100% co-op. So I want to go to Roger, and if you would talk a little bit about um, what's a real workers cooperative versus a lot of people think of like there's like grocery store cooperatives that are kind of like, I guess you could call them almost neighborhood cooperatives or cooperative in name only. What's a real workers cooperative, and how did you get interested in them and start vocally supporting them so much in the various media spaces and in local politics where you advocate? If you want to, yeah, just give maybe little background, whatever you wanted to say, but also like please give a very clear what is a workers co-op, because I feel like, yeah, a lot of people just think of like Winco or PCC or something.
Okay, so let me just say this because Nick had mentioned socialism. So let me just say this. Um, First, one must ask oneself, what is your desire? Is it to keep capitalism in place or replace it? Now, the dictionary term for socialism is an economic model where workers and or the community have shared ownership of the means of production and distribution, also known as manufacturing and supply chains. So that takes care of the part with what Nick was saying, was you just don't want to have this cooperative company working in a supply, being a link of a corporate supply chain. So along with resources in exchange. That doesn't describe a union, that describes a worker cooperative. When the workers have shared ownership in business, then what happens is the need to strike and fight a boss is eliminated. Whatever it is you want, you vote on it as worker owners, no involvement by government. Now, the way I got introduced to it was I was part of something called the IDG. It's called the Independent Drivers Guild that was with Uber some years ago. And there was a guy who used to come in and he used to talk about unions, but then he started talking about cooperatives. And, I'm always thinking of, an apartment or whatever the case is. And then he started, talking more about it. And, like, I got interested in it, but I kind of like put it on the shelf for some years or whatever. And I don't know, I think it might have been, it was probably Professor Richard Wolff watching his economic updates for the past few years, where he's a big promoter of it. So that's pretty much where I had, where I was just like, oh, okay. And I just started researching it more. And I'm like, you know what? This can work. You know what I mean? I was looking at it, and while unionization so I think of like unionization keeping capitalism in place by creating a regulated capitalism, while worker cooperatives replace it with socialism. Okay, so the problem with keeping corporations around, as we've seen in history, okay, is that they eventually gain the upper hand in our economy. If you take a look back to, like what brought FDR into power was you had the Unionists, the American Communist Party, the American Socialist Party all came together, and they pretty much was running things. Brought FDR into power. I'm not saying FDR was a perfect president, not by no means, or whatever the case is. But once he died, then the rollback started to happen. Whether you want to talk about Taft-Hartley or this or that, or decommissioning the postal banking system, all of that, because it was left in place. They always say that FDR saved capitalism.
Can anyone else hear me? It seems like Roger is frozen for me.
I can hear you. He just froze for me too.
All right, I'll send him a text. Yeah, I think we can kind of.
Oh, it looks like he's back.
Are you back, Roger?
Am I back?
Yeah.
You're back. I think you're back. It says you. I don't know. I can't tell if it says you have full bars or they're red, so maybe they're not great connection. I don't know what that is, but you seem really clear right now. So
Yeah, you seem good.
I don't know. The last thing you heard me say was.
You're talking about FDR.
Yeah.
FDR
And
died
rollbacks.
and the rollbacks happened.
Yes.
Yeah.
So once FDR died, that's when the 40-year rollback started to happen. Of course, culminating with coming to its fruition was Ronald Reagan. All because, and so when he said he saved capitalism, yeah, he did exactly that. He left it in place, but it was a regulated capitalism where all of those regulations and you know what I'm saying? So like I always say, like for instance, like the difference between progressives and socialists is progressives believe in a regulated capitalism through regulation, antitrust enforcement, and unionization, while socialists just want to replace the whole thing and just be done away with that. Okay. So here's the thing. I definitely understand Nick's concerns. So it's not like, I'm just like, oh, whatever the case is. No, I definitely understand that, I just have to, it's just me and Marco's job to try to convince you. Okay. But what it's going to take, now understand, I'm not talking about public sector unions. That's like a different thing. I'm not talking about government unions. I'm talking about unions in the private sector is what I'm talking about. So what it's going to take is heavy government investment in cooperatives for it to work. Remember, none of these corporations got large without robust government investment. That is what's needed today. These fights are going to start, and these fights are going to start in the States. And more particularly, it's going to have to start in the citizen ballot initiative states. And more particularly than that, it's going to have to start in the citizen ballot initiative states that allow for voters to place their amendments, not laws, but amendments on the ballot to be ratified into their state constitution. Because the thing is that you do a law, the state government could come in and repeal it, change it around, weaken it without having to ask you. You do it as an amendment, they have to ask you. Okay. So I remember one of the things that we can do, because I'm really more about really solutions than like what I'm saying, like whatever, fighting people. I'm not saying we fight whatever, but one of the things that I remember here Professor Wolf saying was we need a right of first refusal law like they have in England, saying once a company grows beyond a certain threshold, or if it already has, before they file for bankruptcy, before they go public, or if it already has, before they automate or further automate, before they merge, and before they outsource, they make an offer to their workers to purchase the company. If workers do not wish to own a company, then the company must include a severance package with a paycheck equal to what they would have made in a year if it is a national global company. 6 months if it is a mid-sized company, 3 months for a small company, right? So let's say, for instance, they want to purchase it, but they can't right now. So you can say the government takes it over until they work off that loan, then the company is theirs. Now, I also have an amendment solution where calling for the commissioning of a new state agency. I call it the Cooperative Business Administration. That's just me, okay? That does for cooperative businesses what the Federal Small Business Administration does for small businesses, providing counseling, tax resources, a voice, government contracting, consultation, education, training, financing, research, all to make it easier to form business cooperatives from scratch or purchasing from the owner of a corporation to convert it to a co-op when applying right of first refusal laws. Something like a CBA would be perfect for workers who recently had their location shut down. Better yet, instead of taking the reactive approach, take the proactive approach where the moment corporate headquarters makes the threat that they're going to shut you down if you try to unionize. I'm thinking like Starbucks. They can go to the CBA, ask for help to offer to the community the same thing that their former current employer was offering before they leave, or decided to leave after they threatened to unionize. So instead of it seeing as a loss of jobs leaving the community, it can be seen as an opportunity to create something new, consumer or worker cooperative in its place. So the CBA can also be a source for inventors to go to as an alternative to have to go to private equity, wealthy capitalists and the like to go to provide seed money to help them invest in their inventions they are working on, with the stipulation that should that invention come to fruition, they wish to build a business around it, that it must be a worker-owned cooperative manufacturer. In recent situations, we've been seeing lately of workers uniting to unionize, and corporate HQ ends up shutting that location down, then using that as a threat weapon, example, to other locations that they will do the same should they decide to unionize. Now, what you was talking about before between the consumer cooperative, financial cooperative, well, the worker cooperative I already explained. A financial cooperative is a credit union, so they can work hand in hand. That can be part of your supply chain, especially if we did a public bank, which, you know, I don't want to get too far into that, but that can support, that can be the replacement FDIC for credit unions and local community banks.
Yeah.
Yeah, consumer cooperative, you know, I guess the multi-stakeholder cooperative is your supply chain, by the way. But you also have, I'm most familiar with the worker one because it's, you know, like, not too sure how the consumer ones work. I know Ace Hardware is the largest retail cooperative in the world, last time I checked.
Yeah, that's where I feel like the term gets really muddied or watered down in like the public understanding. I do think you did a really good explanation at the beginning, though, basically saying that a workers' cooperative is a business where the means of production for the business are communally owned by the workers and or local community. I think that is an interesting part of workers' cooperatives that can be integrated. But also I wanted to just hit on a couple points and ask you a couple questions where you're saying that ideally for workers cooperatives to be this vehicle that can surpass unions in their power and really stop replicating capitalism or stop holding it in place, as you're saying, there would need to be basically popular control of the government to provide the capital and legal protections to do that. And I will put in links for any of the three of you who want to put in more information for people to check out from your own videos or other people's videos, like for instance on public banking or state ballot initiatives for constitutional amendments to the state constitution. I think all of that's really valuable, but I'm curious, do you see there being utility in the meantime? Because in most cases, that scenario that you're talking about is years away or
right, long term.
only exists in some areas. So in the meantime, do you see utility to starting workers cooperatives, or would you say until we get to that point that you would still say, well, in the meantime, continue with union struggle instead of co-ops because we don't have the capital yet? Or what do you see for a short to midterm strategy rather than saying we need these 3 to 5 kind of major pieces to fall in place for control of government power? What do you see as like the strategy until then, alongside pushing for those changes to happen in government?
So still do your unionization, but I would suggest this. I really do think rank and file, for those who live in what do you call it? For those who live in ballot initiative states, citizen ballot initiative states, where they can run citizen ballot initiative amendments, I would suggest that they push these things as amendments also, because they're already an organized entity. You feel what I'm saying? They can do a two-pronged battle. I just got a text a couple of days ago, last week, where a friend of mine who I knew from the Bernie movement, okay, she said, "Hey, Raj, I'm up here in Massachusetts and we're pushing what do you call it? Something for ride-hailing drivers, because I'm a ride-hailing driver for Uber or whatever the case is, right?" And she showed me it, and I was just like, yeah, this initiative is kind of weak, because just putting the other stuff aside, one of the things that they were advocating for, right, was to force the Uber ride-hailing companies to deliver healthcare. Well, I'm like, well, shoot, why don't they there's a Massachusetts Medicare for All bill that the senator is not pushing of that state, of that bill. Just take that, run that as a citizen ballot initiative amendment, and then you take having to try to negotiate with your boss off the table when it comes to delivering on healthcare. That's off the table. Boom, we got that. So a lot of times where you have these strikes, and these bosses like to be like, oh, try to threaten you with your healthcare or try to take away your healthcare, whatever. But if you already passed this as an initiative amendment in the state constitution, well, we already got it. So you can't, so the boss class can't use that against us.
Yeah, just a real quick reminder. I believe it was a UAW or maybe just GM strike some years ago, where there were about 50,000 workers on strike, and the company literally just turned off their health insurance payments.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, you're definitely right about that. That will, the more that you can take off the negotiating table for
in your favor.
Yeah, in the workers' favor, so that it's just a given, it's not up for negotiation. The more that you ask for increases in wages or to push for particular investments of profits. Yeah, I don't want to cut you off though. Were there more kind of short to midterm strategies? So you were saying continue with unionization, push, especially in the states that have the possibility of a state constitutional amendment, to create engines to provide capital and legal protections for workers cooperatives. Did I miss anything else? Are there more?
There's laws. Oh, sorry. There's laws already on the books. Okay. At the federal, we got to start talking about chopping these corporations down to size. Okay, because there's too much monopolization going on. So at the federal level, you got the 1890 Sherman Antitrust Act and the 1914 Clayton Act. But at the state level, okay, you have the 2015 Model Corporate Charter Revocation Act, which gives state attorney generals the ability to what do you call it? To remove these companies' corporate charters, okay, for practicing egregious behavior at putting the environment at risk, workers at risk, the community at risk, pretty much screwing everyone over except themselves. But no one really knows about it. The AGs are not enforcing it. So that's a law that's already on the books that can be enforced. The only thing is, I didn't see anything in that law that allows them to, and this would be a good addition, that, okay, we're going to revoke it, because corporate charter is not a right. Okay, so you could say revoke the corporate charter and put in there, we're going to transfer ownership to the workers. Okay, which is something I wish Obama would have did in 2009 with the car companies. It'd be like, we're going to give the company back to the people who ran it into the ground. You know what I'm saying? We're going to float you. We're going to float the workers alone. Okay, you guys are out. We're going to float the workers alone for them to take over the company, and they can run it the way they see fit. You see what I'm saying? So when the workers own it, they're not going to outsource their own jobs to out the community, out the state, and out the country, and making themselves unemployed. You know what I mean? So, you know, think about like this. I'll just say this real quick. Think about if, now I'm for nuclear energy. I don't know how anyone else feels or whatever, because people are like, oh, you know, whatever. But nuclear energy to fight climate change, as long as it's not under shareholder ownership, but cooperative stakeholder ownership, community control. Okay, that's self-regulatory. You feel what I'm saying? Because when the workers come from the community that the plant is located in, they're not going to try to, they're self-regulating. They're not going to try to cut corners and put their drinking water environment and soil and food and all that stuff at risk. So, you know, but yeah, I just wanted to, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, no, that's all really good. I wanted to move to Marco in just a second. Marco, I think, can sew together a lot of what we've talked about already, but real quick, this kind of talk about right of first refusal, there's been kind of limited examples in the United States where it's almost happened, or where there was a possibility of that happening. And I wanted to talk about the case of Conrail. I believe in the the 70s and 80s, there were a large number of rail carrier companies on the East Coast that were I guess they were considered not profitable enough by the federal government. It's a really weird, kind of backwards reason almost, that the federal government decided to take over these companies and create Conrail. They took over multiple companies, they merged them together, and they created a government rail company called Conrail. But they did it for reasons that I would say run counter to why I would hope there would be a public rail company. But there was a moment in, I believe, the 1980s where Conrail could have been sold to rail workers unions and operated by rail workers unions. And I think this is kind of an interesting, like, middle road example where state intervention can really validate and the efforts of unionism over years and take them up to another level where there is a, and that's also kind of the case with workers cooperatives. It seems like there's kind of in both strategies, there is a big roadblock unless there is real democracy, people's control of state organs and direction of capital investment, et cetera. So I would encourage people to look up that Conrail, the formation of Conrail, and then the sale of Conrail back to private ownership later, and the process for both of those things. But I wanted to open it up to Marco. Marco, if you would talk a little bit about your experience with unions and workers cooperatives, and maybe talk a little bit about how you see a model for unions and workers cooperatives to be a dual strategy, where workers cooperatives are joining unions and where unions are potentially helping to seed workers cooperatives. And I also wondered if you would try to give examples of, are there certain industries that you can identify right now, or lines of work or geographic regions of the country where in one case you would advise more heavily investing time and resources into a union, and in another case you would advise more heavy focus on workers cooperatives, and just kind of take it away from there?
Yeah, so a really good example would be the largest worker co-op in the US is Cooperative Home Care Associates, professional medical home care people who go to people's homes and provide healthcare in the home. So they have about 2,500 members, and they have done a really good job making a really good co-op, and they've done a really good job making a better job for the members of the co-op. But when that co-op joined the SEIU and became a union co-op, together they passed a law statewide that raised the wages and benefits of all home care workers. So
Really?
that's
They're like in the south of the East Coast, right? They're like in kind of the American South,
no,
or
I think they're in New York actually.
oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of another one that's very similar, but sorry, go ahead. They were able to, when they combined forces with SEIU, make really big, even like policy changes.
Right. Yeah. So that's the kind of example of how they can really work together. And Nick was also talking about like examples of where it has worked. And there's a state in Italy called Emilia-Romagna, and a third of the state's GDP is worker co-ops. And the reason why a third of their GDP is co-ops and 40% of their workers are working in worker cooperatives is because in the 1980s, they passed a law where you could take your unemployment benefits and instead of getting your unemployment every week, you get all the whole thing is one lump sum if you join with 9 other workers minimum to start a worker co-op. So this is like what Roger was talking about, where you can have the government pass policies that encourage worker co-ops. And so if you can imagine a union seeding worker co-ops who then spend their profits on the union's unions like goals, you could then have a place where you could create that law of the in the states, right? So it's like seizing the means of production isn't just a factory, it's also producing legislation. So like another example of a co-op producing legislation is a co-op here in Portland that was started by an organization that's from California called what's their name? Decriminalize Nature. And so they started a worker cooperative in Portland that started fundraising for a ballot measure. They started with some seed money from their parent organization to hire a worker to fundraise, and the worker fundraised enough money to then hire another worker, and then another worker and another worker, and they got up to 7 workers. They raised $100,000 on top of paying themselves, and then they had enough money to make a ballot measure. And they ended up folding their ballot measure because they were going countywide, and there was a competing measure that was statewide for the same issue. So they didn't end up going to ballot because the other bigger measure went to ballot. The bigger measure, so both of them were for psilocybin mushrooms to make them medically legal in Oregon or in the county. And so the county measure was paid for by the Dr. Bronner Soap Company. So both ballot measures were paid for by a company. One company, the capitalist at the company, decided to take the profits and pay for the ballot measure. The other company, the workers collectively, took their profits to pay for the ballot measure. This is seizing the means of production.
Yeah, and I think this to me is kind of an answer to one of Nick's questions, which is where do workers' cooperatives pass from just increasing or improving the working conditions over a general private company to directing the flow of capital and investing into things? And I really like the examples that you've given of where there can be a kind of completely what do you call it? A symbiosis of unions and cooperatives. It is a possibility to make this strategy where the union seeding workers cooperatives can increase union membership or keep it the same, but push up the floor of wages in that industry with cooperatives. But also, instead of just pushing up wages, the cooperatives can then direct their capital as a percentage more of their capital than a private company that is basically doing battle with unions back into union struggle or into policy. So I find this very compelling. Do you want to you can keep on going with more examples, or do you also want to talk about maybe the formation of your cooperative and joining a union? And then in a minute, I'd also like to talk about like resources that are already available in the meantime for cooperatives and things. But yeah, go take it wherever you want. But if you wanted to also go into more of your like the process of doing it yourself.
I can go into that, but something I kind of wanted to address first was another thing that Nick was talking about. Like Nick was talking about how he couldn't imagine a co-op UPS to compete with UPS. And I would really agree with that, because I think that the strategy would be to put UPS out of business, not to replace them, because they're not a good company. They're not an example of who we want to be. You know, I remember the world before Amazon, and we were fine. I don't see a co-op to beat Amazon. I see running Amazon out of business. You know, seizing the means of production means that when you have, so in Emilia-Romagna, 40% of the workers are in a worker co-op. That means the capitalists only have 60% of the potential workers to ever compete to get. And they are outcompeted by the co-ops because the co-ops pay better. And so like we talked about on the RBN panel, Nick, I see the strategy for the UPS. It's like the entire union strategy you laid out is something I completely support 100%. And I want to seize the means of the workers to seize the means of production to do that strategy. Because when you own your workplace and when you like, you know, like I go to my downtown marina. There's like a river in Portland, and there's all these yachts. Every one of those yachts is paid for by the workers of some capitalist who steals their profits. So there's so much money in the workers' power. The means of production are literally in our hands. We just have to seize them. And so I see the UPS Teamsters forming co-ops, having the money then to do the union strategies that are already very effective. So like, what if the Teamsters could pay salters the difference to a living wage? What if you could join the union as a salter and get paid $30 an hour because UPS pays you $7 and then the union pays you 23.
For me and all the other people out there, what's a salter?
Oh yeah, so a salter is when a union sends a person into a workplace to unionize it.
Gotcha.
So like,
okay, so
like
Nick,
you,
On
so
the
you,
opposite side of a union buster, it sounds like.
it is, yeah, and salting, you know, preparing the meat for dinner, right?
gotcha.
Um,
That's funny.
Have you thought of okay, so putting UPS out of business, or like I said, using the 2015 Model Corporate Charter Revocation Act, taking away their corporate charter.
Sure, I mean, yeah, that's
And
also
transferring
seizing,
ownership
that would
to
be
the
seizing
workers.
the company. You know, there's a really good film from 2004, I think, called The Take. And it's about how there's these people in Argentina who were a union on strike, and they were auto parts workers. And they were on strike for so long that they decided that they were just going to seize the company. And there was a way in their court at the time where you could prove to the court that the business was
Negligent or something.
no, what it was
Is
is
in
the business
Argentina.
was selling off the equipment while the strike was happening.
Oh,
And so that's in bad faith against the striking. And so they were able to seize the company, and they took the auto parts company and turned it into a worker co-op.
there's an
And-
interesting example very similar
Put it
to
in the link. Put the link in the thing.
Oh, yeah.
yeah, we can show some stuff. I could put it in like in post in the video or maybe share screen. But there's
Yeah, I've got a bunch of links. I'll give you a bunch of links.
yeah, everybody send me links and we can put up graphics in the post. Real quick, I want to give Nick some more time. I know that a lot of this last few portions have kind of been in response to what you're saying, and so I want you to be able to make counterpoints or discuss maybe where there's points of agreement or take it into a different direction. And then I do want to also talk more resources available for starting workers co-ops, and also resources or strategy for unionism. And so maybe one question to start it off, Nick, is are you still a part of that the Leninist organization that is pushing the Foster model, or is there or have you split and you're kind of thinking what to do, or is there new different organizations you would promote for people to join and bolster and keep pushing in this strategy? Because again, I know we've been kind of singing the praises of workers co-ops for like 40 minutes now probably, but I want to reiterate how impressive it is just in monetary terms and workers control as well for what you have done to turn the ship around with the Teamsters and make it viable again. But yeah, do you want to make counterpoints or talk about resources for people?
Yeah, I'm not part of that organization anymore, and I hesitate to name it because I don't feel hostily towards it. I feel like it's full of good people who are doing good work. Um, uh, it was a number of things that coincided that led me to walk away from it. The conditions of our uh, uh, the work we're doing in Salt Lake, and some political shifts on my part. Um, but well, to speak to um, the plan outlined by Roger, that did make sense of using mechanisms of state like ballot initiatives to direct funds towards building up these co-ops that could compete against privately owned corporations. The thing that it reminded me of, thinking about ballot initiatives. I'm not sure how many states there are that have those very like free and open laws regarding ballot initiatives. I know
23.
here in Utah, 23. Oh wow,
23
big
and
enough.
17 allow them to ratify their own amendments into their state constitution. But the
And
other
that's just states that allow any kind of ballot initiative.
yeah, so in other words, Utah, Washington, Maine, Wyoming, and Alaska, and there's another one that flies that but they only allow them to do initiatives for laws. Yeah, Utah, Washington, Maine, Alaska, Wyoming, and there's another one, I forgot which one it was, that only allow them to do laws, which means sure they could pass a law, but you know the government can come in and say, we don't like that, we're going to get rid of it, without having to ask you. Although they do have the option to repeal the law that repealed their law, snapping their initiative law back into place. You feel what I'm saying? The veto referendum is just the people putting a referendum on the ballot to repeal laws. So you pass a law, I, government, repeal your law. Marco does a veto referendum to repeal my law, snapping your law back into place. Okay?
Okay.
Rather than just where the other states, the 17 states that either only do amendments or do amendments in addition to law, they can just do the amendment. And if the government want to do anything, they have to ask the voters first. So I always suggest, when it comes to initiatives, when it comes to giving an uppercut to power, you do amendments. But if it's something that does not threaten power, do law. You know what I mean? Like, I want to get rid of plastic grocery bags or something like that, something that's like non-threatening. Or I want to give the option for point of sales to offer to have my receipt emailed to me. You feel what I'm saying? That doesn't threaten power. But once you start talking about, I want to put term limits on these politicians, yeah, you better pass that, do that as an amendment. But anyway, my bad, you go.
Okay, no, yeah, I was just thinking about a few years ago in Utah, we had a
Idaho.
Uh,
that was the one.
Idaho as well.
Yeah.
A few years ago in Utah, we had a ballot initiative to legalize medical marijuana, and it was passed really overwhelmingly. It was super successful at the ballot box, but then the way we have the laws here in Utah, it allows the um, state legislature, using conjunction with the LDS Church, when it's something that's relevant to them, to go in and to mess with it and to dilute it and to water it down. And that's what we got with the medical marijuana bill. It was like severely restricted from what the voters actually approved overwhelmingly. I think correct me if I'm wrong. I really think of California as being the state that has like the most open ballot initiative laws. As far as like every year, there's like tons of props on their ballot, and a lot of them are very consequential. Maybe it's just because it's a big state and what they do matters a lot. But it made me think of Prop 22 back in 2020. In 2019, the California legislature had passed a law saying that gig workers, Uber drivers, DoorDash, all that kind of stuff, that those would be those workers would be classified as employees and be subject to the same laws as other regular employees, as far as like benefits and wages and the ability to unionize. The gig corporations obviously really didn't like that, so came back the next year with a ballot initiative that said, no, we are going to classify them as independent contractors, and they're not going to have the ability to unionize, but we'll give you these little things. You'll make 120% of minimum wage. I don't know if that was federal minimum wage, if it was like $10 an hour or something they were promising. We'll give you a stipend towards your health care, like, and I don't know what that ended up being. Like, here's $20 a month or something to go out and buy, your $70 bargain bin insurance coverage. And they had this list of these great things they were going to do for the employers instead, and the gig companies, Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, poured $205 million into this campaign, just massive advertising campaign.
Mm-hmm.
All their apps for both consumers and drivers, like they were getting these updates telling them how important it is to say yes on 22 and give these drivers all these benefits. And they won by a wide margin. It was like 59% to 41% in the end. And most people who voted yes on 22 thought they were doing something really great for these gig workers. They were giving them all these incredible rights. So that's what that would be my hesitation about the
Ballot initiative process.
ballot initiative route, is that if you're presenting something that would really take away from these corporations or force them to compete on a fair playing field against co-ops, that they have the money and the resources to manipulate public opinion. I mean, I was following Prop 22. I followed dozens of left podcasts and news outlets, and I knew what it was, and I have the background, the history, and the education on labor issues to understand exactly what corporations are doing, but most people just don't have that. And if you're already plugged in on the left, which is a vanishing small number of people in the U.S., you can see these things for what they are and see them coming, and even in conjunction with unions and other people who had benefited from Prop 22, being defeated, it wasn't enough to actually educate the public, because I'm sure there's very few people voting yes on 22, or saying like, yeah, let's screw over the gig workers permanently. I don't want my Uber driver to have the ability to unionize or to win wages and benefits beyond what the company is willing to hand out. But ultimately, that's where it ended up, just because we don't have the capital to compete. I mean, and to speak to Marcus's comments, I have no doubt that there's lots of niches in the economy that cooperatives can fill and can become much bigger and much more common than they currently exist. But when you start talking about putting 340,000 Teamsters out of work, that's not a message that resonates with people. It brings me back to 2016 and Hillary versus Trump, where Trump was willing to make the false promise that he was, going to bring back the coal jobs to West Virginia, and Hillary was out there saying like, we're going to put the coal companies out of business because they're so awful and do so much polluting. And people were willing to, even people who were absolutely self-aware that what Trump was saying was impossible and the coal jobs weren't coming back, were willing to cast their vote his way, just at least because he was at least willing to speak to their actual interests, and was willing to lie about backing their interests, rather than saying out loud that they're never getting their jobs back. But if you're talking about putting UPS out of business, that really does mean having it cooperative or a series of cooperatives who can compete directly against UPS, and they're everything I outlined earlier, with their hubs across the country and their massive fleets of trucks and package cars and cargo planes. And I still just don't see the mechanism of getting to that point of where you can compete directly with these massive corporations. And even once you get there, especially the non-unionized corporations are going to be able to undercut you at every point and deliver goods or services to the public far cheaper by being more exploitative.
So,
So to just talk directly about that. So like, how is UPS going to do that when they lose 40% of their workforce to those workers not becoming unemployed, but by working in their competitors? Every co-op that competes with UPS is UPS workers. So
right, but you need to get to that point.
So you recruit from the union. You grow
right, but you need in place those fleets of trucks, those airplanes, those hubs. You need that physical infrastructure before you're able to take anyone away.
Right, and so the union builds that infrastructure with co-ops, businesses that are union businesses. Like the Teamsters could have a local truck delivery business, right? There's a lot of businesses that the Teamsters support that aren't UPS. So you start those businesses within the Teamsters. And that's what I'm doing in CWA. CWA represents all these different kinds of workers, and I'm a tech worker by trade. Like I've been working for capitalists for my whole life. I'm a tech worker. So I start a tech company, and then the profits of our tech company go into the union to form other co-ops in the union. And then whoever the union decides they want to attack with all this power they've built is the union's choice, right? And so the Teamsters could build all these companies in their union and then use the profits of those companies to attack UPS.
I think you're overestimating the. I think you're overestimating the amount of resources that unions have at their disposal. I know for my local, 222 covers the entire state of Utah. When the current leadership that we have came in, I think close to 2 decades ago, maybe further, our local was deeply in debt and just hemorrhaging money. And over the years, they've through good management, they've been able to build up their funds, and we've got $3 million at this point that we have that some of that would have been used had we had the strike at UPS last month. That's in place to pay legal bills. We employed lots of lawyers for contract negotiations and to directly represent members when they need it. All the expenses of running a union are somewhat high, and it takes a long time to build up even meager resources, especially in a right to work state where no one is legally obligated to pay any dues, and it's you have to go person by person to get them to give up a cut of their paycheck every week to be able to fund the union. And it's $3 million. It's not nothing, but as far as like building and running a business, that would drain us of everything we have to that we have in place in order to meet the needs of members currently.
And you're talking nationally, it would, like, I just was looking up to talk about scale. The price of a Boeing 737, what are they 800s that or 700s that UPS uses?
I'm not sure which one.
Well, I guess the point is like the floor for the price of one 737, regardless of model, would be like $80 million or $90 million. And seems like that could very quickly exhaust, like to build a competitor to UPS just in the terms of infrastructure and materials and vehicles would probably use up almost all the money that the Teamsters have, if not all of it or more. And then the other question I have is also about like contracts. Like how are you going to get shipping contracts? Because like UPS does a lot of business for Amazon, doesn't it? Like as far as stuff like
we deliver a lot of Amazon's volume.
Yeah, and like Amazon is never going to hire a union or a workers co-op alternative to UPS, even if it was possible that they could deliver the packages cheaper, which I'm not. And so again, I think there's really important questions of scale here that will probably dictate what where workers cooperatives and where union co-op model is really viable. I didn't want to stop you too much, Nick. I just wanted to talk like price point, like how much money does the Teamsters even have in the pocket just for general operations and strikes and stuff. It could last a while, but to build a company, I don't know.
Yeah, I imagine it's nowhere close to what you need to build a competitor, much less meet the current needs of members. I've seen local unions who will own a bar. I think that's somewhat common in certain areas of the country, maybe in the Midwest, and I think that's within the power of local unions to do. But yeah, you're right. Everything you spoke to are massive barriers. I mean, to open a small warehouse and hire a few transport vans to deliver packages, like you need to attract customers, and you would need to be in cooperation with someone who does delivery via air, and like you said, you would have to get these corporations to get on board with hiring you as a customer with your stated goal of growing to the point where you destroy those companies that you're expecting to hire you now. It just doesn't seem like a viable path forward to me.
Well, that's the reason why I was saying, with these large companies, transfer ownership to the workers instead of like trying to take them out and build something anew. Like, and like I said, at the same time, there are things in place. There's laws that are already on the books that can be done. Like I said before, revoking corporate charters so that you give the opportunity to transfer, such as antitrust law, to break them up and make them smaller, create more competition, and probably gives an opening where they're small enough to be to enforce a right of first refusal law. You know what I'm saying? But just going back to the California thing, that was a veto referendum, okay? Because the government passed the law that says, contract workers and, so on and so forth. But it was a veto referendum that was sponsored by the ride-hailing companies that got the voters to vote on to repeal that law. So I just want to keep the language correct. Now, as far as where California is concerned, so yeah, they'll have a lot of things on their initiative. But here's the thing: it also is about improving the initiative process, such as California only gives 6 months to do a petition drive. Okay. Meanwhile, Arizona and some other citizen ballot initiative states gives 18 months, where it starts, let's say, on January of an odd numbered year and ends June of the next even numbered year. You feel what I'm saying? So it gives time to build that momentum and to educate the public and so on and so forth, because big money is advantaged by short time window, while grassroots is benefits from huge time window. So it gives you time to gain momentum. So there's also, you said you're in Utah? Did you say you was in Utah, Nick?
Yeah, Utah.
So like, if there's a way in order to become this is a separate fight of its own, but if there is a way to somehow, I guess, like, organize with your union and those so on and so forth, to possibly get the Utah legislature to put an initiative before you, a legislative initiative before you, to ratify into the Utah Constitution, that would give you the right to not only place initiatives as laws on the ballot, but your own amendments as well. And that's the tricky thing, because it's getting them, is trying to force them to share power with you. Eventually, I want to at least get 40 states, minimum of 40 states, to be able to do this in terms of initiative amendments. Because then what happens is, then we can actually start running the government from at the state level and eventually affect the federal level. I know that's a long term. I'm thinking in long term, or whatever the case is. But like I said, there are different avenues. It would be interesting how the Utah government would feel about a cooperative business administration. You know what I mean? Like, I guess maybe if you pitch it as promoting business, it's worker-owned businesses. You know what I mean? That government agency I was talking about, right? That acts the same way as the Federal Small Business Administration to help grow worker cooperatives in the state, or to help transition over from, because what's happening is a lot of baby boomers are retiring, and they don't want to just shut down their business, and their kids don't want it. So there's these groups that come in, like we got them out here in Long Island suburbs, that come in and they help to transfer, show them how to transfer ownership to their workers. So this is the way their workers are not out of work because they're retirement and they're closing a business. So there's a whole bunch of different attacks that can be done. You know what I'm saying? I'm just advocating that we use all the tools that are in our toolbox, you know, because this is a game of chess. You know, you got to know how to use those pieces correctly. And, you know, a terrible chess player is one that I'm just going to depend on my queen to take everybody out. And, you know, that don't work. You got to know how to, you know what I mean? Know how to use those pawns and those knights and those bishops and those rooks, baby. You know what I mean? And to the point where you can be like, I could play without my queen. You know what I'm saying? I don't even need my queen. You know what I mean? But like I said, all those strategies and different solutions that I got, ways to get it done. You know what I mean? I even said, because some states do this, where they have some citizen ballot initiative states for amendments have this, where they say, hey, look, if we pass a law, you guys cannot touch that law for X amount of years. Okay. And after that time expires, then you can touch it. Then the government can touch it. You know, I always advocated for like 14 years. You know what I mean? Like, then you could see the law in its full effect. At the 10th year, 4 years before that law expires, that was pushed by the citizens, that was passed by the citizens, then like this is my plan for New York State. Then the government puts a legislative initiative before the voters, asking them, okay, what do you want us to do with this law? It's about to expire in 4 years. You want us to repeal it? You want us to put this law before you as a legislative initiative amendment to ratify into the state constitution? Do you want us to change it? Or you don't give a fuck? Okay, so if you do, yeah, we want to make this an amendment. Okay, so then the legislative comes back and puts it before the voters as amendments. But if they do not do that, if the voters chose, we want to make it an amendment, then that law automatically gets extended until they put it before the voters to say, do you want to ratify this? If they choose, we want to change it around, then the legislature got to come back and say, these are the changes that we want to do. Do you like any of them or none of the above? You know what I mean? And if we choose this one, that one, then they have to do it as that. If not, then the original law goes back into place. If they and if we choose none of the above, then they got to come with something else. So I mean, that's like my plan, but you know, like, you know.
Yeah, going back to UPS. So like, what if the post office outcompeted UPS? Because as far as I'm concerned, everything the UPS does, the post office should do, as well as Amazon, as well the e-commerce version. All that could be the post office. See, the post office is radical people. They wanted to become an ISP in the 90s, internet service provider, and Congress wouldn't let them. So like, for instance, like talking about how do we attack and take out UPS, it's kind of like thinking about how do we fix the post office. It's that big of a scale question that we're dealing with here. So like, we don't have the power in our people's movements to work on that scale. And this is what you were talking about, Andrew, questions of scale. How do we get to that scale? We have to, for instance, get enough. So the post office chains are put on it by Congress. So we need to seize Congress in order to fix the post office. And so Congress is a bunch of people put in there by a bunch of capitalists. What if all those capitalists lost their businesses to co-ops? Then the co-ops would use their money to put in their people who would be pro post office.
Yeah, but I want to like repeat something Nick said at the beginning when I asked, like, what do you see as workable solutions to the sort of like the later and last hurdles to push from stopping the bleeding to building a workers' economy, a people's economy. And Nick, I think he said it might as well be 9,000 years in the future, just from where we're standing right now. And it's I don't want to make this such a depressing point. I don't feel depressed saying this, but I do feel like all of the different solutions that the four of us have been bringing up and strategies do require a widening of the base. And that also kind of reminds me of the discussion where how we started the discussion, talking a little bit about William Z. Foster saying that arguing that the better strategy for unionism is not to concentrate all the people with really left politics into one committee, but to spread them out into various other areas and try to bring people in. And so that this is almost like a topic for many more videos. We're getting close to 2 hours, I think, of recording. We're probably at about an hour and 40 minutes, and I want to respect everybody's time. Are you all feeling good? Do you want to wrap? Are there sort of final comments that you want to make? Are there other yeah, again, like Nick, I know you said that you don't work with that organization anymore, but are there other organizations, or is there a web resource where you would point people who want to go into union organizing, or at least just join a union and figure out, how do I do it? How do I manage my time doing it? Which unions are if I want to join one that I just need a life preserver, which one do I join that's not run by a Jimmy Hoffa Jr. type of person? Or if I am really into this idea of this struggle and I want to help, where are maybe next unions that are equally as strategic as Teamsters?
Before he answers, I got to pick up a customer at 5 o'clock.
Okay.
I didn't know it was going to go this long.
No, you're good. Yeah, I think I said it would go a little shorter, at least I expected, but that's the magic of video editing. But yeah, Roger, thank you so much for coming through. I know you mentioned before that you had other co-op people that you were thinking about inviting. I do want to continue to do more videos on this topic, so we can, if you want to, schedule more, and we can do a whole real long dive on public banking if you want, or whatever else you want to do. I'm definitely open to keep this channel moving in multiple directions. So thanks again for coming.
All right, bro. Nice, guys. Nice talk, guys.
Yeah. Peace out, Roger.
Later.
Yeah, Nick, what do you think? Is it a reasonable question? Like, what are maybe equally strategic, or maybe second in the pecking order, unions to change? What are unions that are already pretty decent? I hear, for instance, like that the Longshore Workers Union stayed pretty radical throughout its history. So if you live on the coast, would you advise someone who wants to join a solid union to join Longshore Workers? Or if you wanted to advise someone to join a union that needs a kick in the ass, where would you point people?
Yeah, well, it's probably first and foremost, it's important to think strategically, as far as like, if a company was to go on strike, what would be the wider effects of it? And obviously I want all the Starbucks and all of the coffee shop workers in the country to enjoy the same union benefits that I do. But if they walk off the job, it's not the it'll make a few people unhappy in the morning, but it's not going to bring the economy to its knees. And that's why I think logistics is really the place to focus on. The West Coast longshoremen are still a very radical union, one of the few unions that made it through the second Red Scare and maintained its character as union centered on class struggle. The electrical workers, I think, are another one if you're looking to specifically join a union with that kind of culture. I don't know how easy it is to make it into the longshoremen because that job has been so automated. I've really felt the pressures of automation in my job. I just in UPS, there was I lost 2 positions in 2 years to robots. First, the sorting the packages as they come into the facility was something that I used to do by hand, looking at the zip codes and directing them onto the appropriate belt to go to the right place in the hub. Now that it's a computer that reads those and directs them. And then after that, I started driving these little tug trains around the hub, delivering the e-reg packages, the big heavy stuff. And now it's robots that do that job. These little automated tugs that go through the building. And I know with the longshoremen, it's you need very few people compared to what it used to take to operate those ports with those massive cranes that stack and unstack the cargo boxes and direct them. So I don't know how easy it is to get one of those jobs, but if you can, there's like longshore worker strikes are a very, very big deal, and they're even willing to do political strikes that have nothing to do with their direct conditions. They've struck in solidarity with political prisoners like Mumi Abdul Jamal. So yeah, if you get into that, that's great. Otherwise, I do think the UPS is a great option. It's we've proven that you can take a corporation with a very entrenched leadership who have been in power for decades, who are very corrupt and are willing to uh, compromise and collaborate with the corporations, that those people can be removed and reform leadership installed in their place. And so I wouldn't say just because a particular union has a collaborationist or corrupt leadership is reason in and of itself to avoid it. It just means there's more of an uphill climb and more work to do in that area. Otherwise, salting is a great option. I was considering doing that for a time as a second job with a particular company that the Teamsters were looking to organize in. As most UPSers are part timers, it's about 60% of the workforce, and he worked like 4 hours a day doing that, and then most people have second jobs they take on as well. So you could do both at the same time. You can also at UPS move into driver positions where there's very really good pay. You can move into the package car delivery and then into the feeders division, driving the semi trucks, and those guys can make 140,000 plus a year. All of us, even the part timers at UPS, after 9 months, have incredible health insurance that the company pays for. So there's a lot of benefits to doing that, and it exists wherever you're listening to this, and they're almost certainly going to be hiring, especially right ahead of peak season. And it's a good career, and there's a lot of opportunities as a labor organizer to turn the company in more and more militant class struggle directions and to make a much wider impact. As far as like left orgs, that's just going to depend on where you're at, how you feel about um, Leninists or Trotskyists or social democrats. I don't really have any particular uh, uh, ones I'd say that like this is the one you got to go with. If you're inclined to go that way, I'd say just do your own research. If you want something that's an organization for specifically militant labor stuff, definitely Labor Notes is something to check out. They have really great resources as far as educational materials. You can order pamphlets and books from them. if you're interested in any particular aspect of labor organizing. They hold their conference every couple years. They're a great one to go with. There's also reformed caucuses inside large unions. Within the Teamsters, it's the Teamsters for a Democratic Union. So that's, you know, an organization inside the union working to make the union better, whether it's got friendly leadership like it does now, or whether it has corrupt and silent leadership as we had a few years ago. Is that about covering?
Yeah. Yeah. Marco, you posted a comment. What if that second job was union co-op? So maybe do you want to talk about, you know, resources to learn more about workers co-ops and their conjunction with unions? I forgot to mention earlier, I wanted to plug the Worker Ownership Loan Fund. And this kind of also brings the conversation back to scale, where the Worker Ownership Loan Fund, if you have a workers cooperative and you join as a member, I think you just pay a small fee for dues. You can apply for a loan of up to a little more than $500,000, which is a lot of money depending on the size and location and industry you're in. But again, like thinking of that's you know, 1/200th of a 737 800, or 1/220th or something. So it's still, with all three of the sort of tracks that we talked about today, we are building foundation blocks right now. We are not necessarily building the higher levels on a skyscraper or anything like that. But yeah, did you want to also plug any resources or organizations that you'd recommend people join or check out or utilize if they're interested in co-ops or union co-op model?
Yeah, so I'm a member of the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives, which is like a sister organization to the Democracy at Work Institute, which is founded by Richard Wolff, a Marxist economist who's pro-union co-op specifically. And so on the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops, there's a Union Co-ops Council. So that's a good resource for like learning about union co-ops. There's also a partnership between Mondragon, which is the largest worker co-op in the world in Spain, and United Steelworkers on the East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
They have what's called a union co-op model that they are advocating unions to use, and it gives all kinds of resources for how the union can start the co-op, can organize them, and specifically it's around steel. They want to do it specifically with steel. And so that's another good resource for union co-op information.
Right on. So DAWI, Democracy at Work Institute, United States Federation of Worker Cooperatives. I believe the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives is also sort of one half of the parents of the Worker Ownership Loan Fund.
Okay.
I can't remember. They say on their website that they were created as a sort of a joint project between the U.S. FWC and another group. But yeah, sorry. Go ahead. Anything else? I don't want to keep interrupting you.
Oh no, I think that was the main recommendations on this. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess I'm willing to commit to a kind of a ending resolution of willing to go on a long march for rebuilding union membership, willing to go on a long march for finding ways to seed workers cooperatives that can become very competitive and interface with unions in a really productive kind of symbiosis. And then I'll just let you both know, same as when Roger headed out, I'm planning to do a lot more videos on many different topics. Definitely personally very interested in doing a lot of videos on agriculture, permaculture, and how it can be used for community power. And, you know, I have had some thoughts for a while about, you know, maybe for another episode or for a quick 2 cents. Do you both feel like if a union were to invest in having a bunch of, maybe they're just from small gardens to mid-sized farms, And do you think they could consider that a reliable resource for instance, for a strike fund, where along with strike pay, you're getting grocery deliveries,
Yeah.
other types of resources like that you could envision as provisions for worker organizing, I guess. Maybe seems like weird for me to stick that in a sort of closing portion, but what do you think?
No, for sure. I mean, so that's once again seizing the means of production. Like I like worker co-op grocery stores, but what's the point of a worker co-op grocery store where all the products on the shelves are made by capitalists?
Yeah.
So like another way, like if we really like seize our food is vital, because food and water is essential. Like if we can seize the means of producing those things, and that's very, there's lots of unions that do that kind of work. Um, Food producing companies that make fresh foods produced locally, that's a significant amount of the food that people eat still. That's a lot of companies that unions could build. Um, Transporting that food around the city, that's companies the unions can build. Um, I also like the idea of like permaculture, like as a radical way to organize and seize food production. But that's not viable in all parts of the country because you can't have there are some permacultures you could have in like Arizona, but it's not
Think
like,
local. We'll say think local. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Any final thoughts on that, Nick?
Like that would be really exciting. I mean, I am learning about urban farming right now. I'm working on a small market garden with a friend, and I'm very interested in permaculture and regenerative agriculture. If somebody could bring a model uh, of that kind of business um, to a union and show that it was um, viable source of revenue. I'd love to be able to present something like that to my union. I think it would take a lot to convince union officials that that's the best use of their money. But yeah, if that's something that somebody wanted to explore and put some work into building a framework for it that could be presented to unions, I think that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, just on a final note, I'd say that I don't think that these the co-op versus union things should be um, thought of as like antagonistic ideas. It's kind of this general trend on the left to believe that like all these um, fights and arguments that we squabble about online are like these big world historic things that we need to have a definitive answer on. Like a few months ago, it was whether or not we're going to have bananas in a uh, uh, post-capitalist America, whether it's going to um, uh, that would be uh, uh, we'd be exploiting the third world for tropical fruit or whatever. And with how few people we have and how little power we have, it's a very very silly thing to be squabbling over. I think there's this underlying belief. It's like if we all put all of our resources into this plan that I know is gonna work out for us, then like we could really have some positive change in this country. But um, the rest of the left just doesn't get it. They're not real leftists. And really, the truth is, if we were to all put all of our efforts and resources into one or another strategy, whether it's unionism or electoralism or whatever you want to name, is there's very little chance that all of our combined resources are at this point going to overcome the power of capital. I think that the best thing that anybody can do is just to be engaged with their family and friends and community and the people that they already have around them, and to just follow their best principles and reasoning, uh, and that's what's going to tell you what's important for you right now. When we, at this point where we lack any kind of a party or central organization that can really mobilize people or affect change on even small local scales. Right now I'm volunteering for a mayoral campaign that I think has a really good shot of winning and make a really positive impact in my city. And that's far different than what I thought I'd be doing a couple years ago when I was, having fantasies about the People's War that was going to overthrow the capitalist powers in the U.S. But it's what feels right to me right now, and I would just tell people, trust your gut and go with what makes sense to you. Don't be led around by the nose by anyone claiming that they've got all the answers and they know how we're gonna win liberation for working and oppressed people in the U.S. because nobody's got that right now.
Yeah. Well, I endorse that a lot, as much as we should be learning and discussing things with people all over the place. I'm 100% on board with what you said, where you should be trying to work with your family, your friends, your local neighborhood, and figure out what you can concretely do there. It doesn't have to be perfect. Don't get caught up in waiting forever to figure out exactly what steps to make before you make any steps. And yeah, I would say, like, regardless of what the project is, instead of saying, oh, it's gonna take forever and so be depressed about that, instead I would say, there's already all kinds of good projects going on, and there's a lot of room for a lot more, and we need that. So again, I'm going to continue to try to keep this channel based on a kind of actionable work. Every episode, I want there to be something. Maybe it's a new thing, or it's revisiting a topic where people can try something out. So thank you both. I'll also just let you know when this is published, and also open an invitation that if you guys or anybody who's close in your circles wants to record something and put it up on the channel, that it's open for that. And that what I'm going to try to do is keep track of everybody's screen time total in the videos, and if there's ever any success in monetization, I'm going to share that revenue, pretty much just split off of how much people are present there. So I'm not trying to release videos daily or anything like that. I want to kind of keep it manageable for myself and everybody else, but I do want to kind of try to launch this and keep it rolling semi-consistently. So I'll probably cut that out, but just for your information. Yeah, well, I'll see you guys later. Thanks again for coming on. And yeah, maybe if I try to do some agricultural episodes next, I'll hit you both up, or do ballot initiative episode. Definitely. Yeah, we'll be back soon. You're muted.
Thanks so much for your time, yo.
Yeah, thanks so much.
And thanks for the Zoom hookup, Marco. You really saved me.
Yeah, if you ever need it, feel free to let me know. I can schedule you a meeting.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, take care. See you later.
Yep.
Bye.